Carl Jung discovered something that completely changes the way you see people, and it might explain why you can feel when something's off even without proof. He said there are two simple moments that reveal who someone truly is, yet most people never notice them. You've probably seen it before. You trusted someone who seemed genuine until the mask slipped. A tone of voice that shifted, a glance that dodged yours, a reaction that exposed what their words tried to hide. Those tiny details almost no one catches. Jung called them the invisible language of the soul. And once you learn to see through that lens, everything starts to make sense. Intentions become clear, masks fall, and what once felt like chaos turns into understanding. But to truly grasp it, you need to know the two subtle signs that expose human character before it's too late. Ever noticed how some people just get under your skin for no clear reason? It's not always what they do, it's what they represent. A tone of voice, a little attitude, a random comment, and boom, something inside you gets triggered. Jung said that's no accident. He called it shadow projection. The moment your unconscious uses someone else as a mirror to show you what you haven't faced within yourself. In the end, life is a mirror that never lies. To make this real, let me tell you a story. David, a smart and respected guy at work, was constantly clashing with a coworker named Marcus. He said Marcus was arrogant, controlling, and hard to deal with. Every small disagreement would set him off. But during a self-awareness retreat, a therapist asked him one simple question: "Why does this bother you so much?" That's when David had a painful realization. He was controlling too. Only, in his case, it came disguised as caring for the team. And this is the first thing Jung said you should pay attention to if you want to see someone's true character. How they react when life holds up a mirror. When a person is confronted with traits they secretly repress: pride, jealousy, insecurity, fear. Their response exposes everything. Some project, accuse, and deny. Others pause, reflect, and grow. That reaction to the mirror, not the mask they wear, shows you who they really are. That's the trap of the shadow. It doesn't show up as a flaw, it hides behind a virtue. You think you're acting out of kindness, logic, or justice, when in reality you're projecting what you can't accept in yourself. Jung said the unconscious is like an actor desperate to get on stage, and if you won't let it, it'll show up wearing someone else's face. That's why certain traits annoy you so much. Not because they're foreign to you, but because they're way too familiar. That irritation, it's recognition wearing a disguise. Once you get this, something changes forever. The other person stops being the villain in your story and becomes a mirror for your own growth. Every strong reaction is a clue not about them but about you. That's why Jung warned, condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. The more you judge, the more you get stuck in the same pattern you're denying. But when you watch with curiosity instead of anger, emotion turns into insight, and slowly chaos starts making sense from the inside out. After that realization, David began seeing Marcus differently. He noticed that Marcus's arrogance was just a shield, a defense against the fear of looking incompetent. The same fear David himself hid behind perfectionism. It was a shock, sure, but also a relief. The tension turned into understanding, and the relationship changed completely. That's what happens when you face your shadow. What once felt like a threat becomes a teacher. And that's where true discernment of character begins. Because once you recognize your own shadow, you start to see others with clarity, without hate, without judgment. You spot the hidden intentions behind smiles, the insecurities behind authority, and the pain hiding under pride. It's like the world suddenly gains extra layers. And that perception, that ability to see between the masks, is the first step to knowing who someone really is before it's too late. Once you learn to see beyond the shadows, you start noticing something even subtler, the masks. Almost everyone wears one, and not always with bad intentions. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's survival. Jung called it the persona, the social image we build to be accepted. And it works until life applies pressure. Because under stress, that polished surface begins to crack. And no matter how convincing the act, the character can't hold the role forever. That's exactly what happened with Sarah. A woman admired at work for being kind, calm, and collected. Everyone saw her as the model of emotional balance. But during one tense meeting, after an unexpected criticism, the mask slipped. Her tone shifted, her eyes hardened, and an old anger burst through. For a few seconds, the whole room froze. No one knew if that was her real self or just a momentary breakdown. But Jung would say it was something deeper, the unconscious demanding to be seen. And this is the second thing Jung said to watch if you want to know someone's true character, how they act when pressure breaks their mask. It's not the rehearsed moments that reveal a person, but the raw ones, the flash of defensiveness, the edge in the tone, the truth that slips out when the ego loses control. When life squeezes someone, their persona shatters, and what's left is the unfiltered self. That reaction under stress, not the image they maintain, exposes what's really inside. Moments like that are revealing. When pressure builds, the unconscious pushes the truth to the surface. The social mask is like a dam. It looks strong until the first crack appears. And when it breaks, what comes out isn't who we pretend to be, but who we've always been. If you pay close attention, you'll see it in the smallest details. The stare that hardens when someone's challenged, the smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the body that shuts down when it feels judged. The body leaks what the mouth tries to hide. Learning to read those micro-expressions is like gaining a quiet superpower. It's not about judging, it's about understanding. You start realizing that a shaky voice hides fear, sarcasm masks insecurity, and coldness is often just a cry for safety. When you see that, the world changes texture. Communication stops being literal and becomes emotional. Suddenly, you're not just hearing words, you're hearing intentions. Jung used to say that true character doesn't show up in control, but in vulnerability. When life's smooth, everyone's polite. But when pride is hurt, fear exposed, or ego threatened, that's when the essence speaks. Sarah learned that the hard way, but also the liberating way. By facing her repressed anger, she found a more genuine version of herself. The mask shattered, and for the first time, she could breathe without performing. And maybe that's the most powerful truth of all. No one is purely mask or purely truth. We're a dance between the two, and the more awareness we bring to that, the more authentic we become. When you watch someone under pressure, you're seeing the unedited self, the torn script. And if you look closely, with empathy instead of judgment, you'll notice something profound. The collapse of the mask isn't the end of the persona, it's the beginning of truth. And that very realization prepares you for the next level, seeing what people try to hide even from themselves. Once you realize that masks crack under pressure, a new question inevitably arises. What happens when yours does? It's easy to analyze someone else's emotional breakdown, but way harder to face your own. Jung said self-awareness begins when you recognize you're made of the same material you criticize. In other words, the real test isn't observing the world. It's watching yourself react to it. That's the moment when awareness stops being theory and becomes practice. The mirror, this time, turns back toward you. Pay attention to your reactions. When someone criticizes you, do you defend yourself, fight back, or listen? When you feel envy, do you try to hide it, or ask what it's showing you about your unmet desires? That's the integration test, turning unconscious impulse into conscious insight. Most people get stuck in guilt, thinking, I shouldn't feel this, it's wrong. But mature awareness says, I felt it, and it taught me something about myself. That's where self-mastery begins. Jung broke this process into 3 levels. The first is the unconscious, when you're ruled by your impulses without realizing it. The second is consciousness, when you recognize what you feel but still fight it. And the third is integration, when you accept, learn, and transform. At this stage, the shadow stops being an enemy and becomes an ally. It doesn't vanish, it evolves. It stops sabotaging and starts protecting. Anger turns into boundaries, fear into caution, guilt into awareness. That's real growth, when emotion stops controlling you and starts guiding you. Empaths, sensitives, introspective souls, they often suffer because they try to be light all the time. But even the sun needs shadow to exist. Integration means ending that inner split. It's realizing you can feel anger and still be a good person, that you can make mistakes and still deserve love. Integration doesn't erase flaws, it shines compassion on them. When you start living this out day by day, everything shifts. Instead of reacting, you respond. Instead of blaming yourself, you understand yourself. And that creates a different kind of presence, grounded, steady, magnetic. People feel it even if they can't explain why. Because someone who's integrated their shadows carries a calmness that doesn't come from avoiding pain, but from embracing it. It's the serenity of someone who no longer needs to pretend to be light, because they've learned how to walk through the dark. And maybe that's the truth Jung tried hardest to teach. Freedom doesn't come from killing your demons, but from calling them by name. When you stop running from the hard parts of yourself, your true character begins to reveal itself. And the curious thing is, once that happens, the world starts responding differently, as if it can feel your new frequency. But understanding that reflection, that outer mirror, requires another kind of vision. The one that reveals what others feel when you begin to change from within. Once you start noticing the unconscious at work in people, it's easy to feel like you've unlocked some kind of superpower. And in a way you have, but that's exactly where the real ethical test begins. Seeing beyond masks doesn't make you superior. It makes you responsible. Because psychological knowledge is like fire. It can illuminate or it can burn, depending on how you use it. Jung warned that awareness without compassion turns into tyranny. And he was right. Using insight to control someone is a betrayal of the very goal of becoming more human. Jung's psychology wasn't meant to manipulate, it was meant to free. The ego loves to use wisdom to feel special. I'm the one who sees, and everyone else is asleep. But true spiritual maturity starts when you realize everyone's somewhere along the same path. Some are waking up, others are still dreaming. Your job isn't to judge those still asleep, it's to keep walking with open eyes. Real emotional intelligence isn't about spotting others' weaknesses. It's about protecting them. When you apply these ideas in daily life, everything shifts. At work, you begin to see that the controlling boss isn't a tyrant, just someone scared of losing control. In relationships, you notice that the distant partner isn't cold. They just haven't learned how to handle their own vulnerability. And as a parent, friend, or mentor, you start reading behavior as the language of pain, not malice. That shift changes how you respond, and in turn, it transforms the quality of your connections. True empathy is born when you realize even the most annoying behaviors are really survival strategies. The one who talks too much fears silence. The one who tries to control everything fears being abandoned. The one who shuts down fears being judged. When you see that, you don't excuse bad behavior, you understand the pain beneath it. And understanding isn't weakness. It's discernment. You learn to say no without hate, to walk away without guilt, and to forgive without being naive. Using psychological insight ethically means remembering that every mind is an invisible battlefield, and no one walks out of their own psyche unscarred. So before analyzing others, ask yourself, am I seeing through empathy or through ego? The line between the two is thin, and the ego loves pretending power is wisdom. That's why Jung insisted that self-awareness must be paired with humility. The wise observe without invading, understand without manipulating, help without controlling. And that's exactly what makes psychology come alive, when it becomes practical, compassionate, human. When you start seeing behavior as an expression of pain rather than evil, life gains a softer texture. You react less, judge less, and experience a rare kind of peace. The kind that comes from knowing no one is just what they appear to be. But that level of awareness brings a new challenge. Staying awake in a world that still prefers the theater of appearances over emotional honesty. Over time, you start realizing that life isn't happening to you. It's showing you you. Every person who crosses your path is a mirror polished by their own experiences, reflecting angles of yourself you haven't yet seen. The aggressive one awakens your fear. The affectionate one stirs your longing. The indifferent one exposes your need to be seen. Jung said the outer world is the stage where the unconscious performs its deepest lessons. And on that stage, you finally understand. Nothing is personal, it's all reflection. It's a hard truth to accept because the ego loves believing the problem is always out there. But the spiritual mirror doesn't lie. Everything you see in others, admiration, envy, love, anger, is a piece of yourself trying to come home. When someone's arrogance irritates you, maybe you're denying your own need to assert yourself. When you're drawn to someone's confidence, maybe you're glimpsing a dormant part of your potential. The mirror doesn't choose what it reflects. It simply shows what is. Jung compared this process to alchemy, the art of turning lead into gold. The lead is the raw, unconscious, heavy, reactive, shadow-filled. The gold is refined awareness, light, integrated, luminous. And the mirror is the furnace where that transformation takes place. Every conflict, every disappointment, every intense admiration acts as a psychological reagent. Pain, as uncomfortable as it feels, is the fire that separates illusion from truth. In this context, suffering becomes the price of clarity. Once this understanding dawns, something deep inside shifts. You stop being a victim of circumstance and start becoming a student of existence. Every difficult person becomes a teacher. Every challenge, a lab experiment. Anger stops being poison and turns into a compass. Envy becomes a reminder of purpose. And love becomes the most sacred mirror of all, because it shows you what you're capable of being. Fear, on the other hand, reveals what you haven't yet accepted within yourself. In the end, everything conspires to bring you back home to who you are. The mirror effect isn't just a psychological concept. It's a spiritual revelation. It shows that life isn't a battlefield of me versus them, but a dance between awareness and projection. When you grasp that, judgment loses its power and compassion takes its place. The other person stops being the villain in your story and becomes a fellow traveler in the same healing process. That's the moment duality begins to dissolve, when you and them merge into reflections of the same mirror. And maybe that's the highest point of Jung's journey. Realizing the mirror was never about others. It was always about you. What you see, what you feel, what you attract. It's all symbolic language from your unconscious trying to wake you up. And when you finally awaken, the whole world changes faces. The people remain the same, but your perception doesn't. And in that new gaze, calm, clear, and compassionate, begins the next level of consciousness. Living with an awakened heart in a world still asleep. In the end, learning to see people's true character is only the beginning. Because the clearer you see the world, the more you're invited to see yourself. Jung said the path of consciousness isn't about becoming perfect. It's about stopping the act of pretending you don't know what you already see. And that's what separates those who awaken from those who merely observe. One turns perception into wisdom. The other stays trapped in judgment. You're not here to be normal, you're here to be conscious. Once that sinks in, every relationship starts to mean something new. Other people's behavior stops feeling personal and starts feeling symbolic. That criticism, that silence, that coldness, it all begins to look less like an offense and more like a message showing where you still react, where you still have healing to do. The real test of character was never about others, but about what you do when the world's mask pushes you to remove your own. Emotional maturity begins the moment you choose to see without running, to feel without losing yourself, and to understand without needing control. And the beautiful part is that once this awareness awakens, judgment gives way to empathy. You start to notice that behind every defense there's pain, and behind every confusing behavior, a fear trying to survive. That doesn't make you naive, it makes you human. True strength is quiet. It comes from realizing we're all just trying to remember who we are beneath the masks. The world stops being a battlefield and becomes a mirror, and that reflection finally stops being something to fear. So, if this journey resonated with you in any way, take a deep breath. You're exactly where you're meant to be, in the process of waking up. Every insight is a step toward your own clarity. Keep walking consciously, and you'll see that nothing out there changes until something in here awakens first. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. Because the next level of your consciousness is closer than you think.